sitting here, I can't. I'm almost like I was.
Okay. So I assume everybody has been informed at this point. This is a one-game final between the University of Pennsylvania and the University of Chicago for the 2015 ACF title. We're going to start momentarily, so our score teachers will be keeping score on the board, and I'll be reading the ball. So please keep it down. No talking during the match. You can save your applause for afterwards. Yeah, why not? You keep this.
I can do the score. I am set. Okay. You need the button. It's like chip that.
Uncle Ernie needs to be up here.
This is important. This is important. I want to make sure we get the
Dude, I'm throwing this much into the mess up.
We just want to
Sounds like.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, everyone silence your cell phones.
I played many friends of my stuff. I lost it.
All right, let's do a buzzer check starting with James over here. All right. G, Chris, Eric, and Patrick. Okay, both teams are ready. We will begin. Finals toss-up one. The first derivation of the potential vorticity equation under a relaxed form of this condition was performed by Jules Charny using Ertel's theorem. That potential vorticity equation under a loosened form of this condition reduces synoptic scale flow to a nonlinear PDE in terms of the stream function. That loosened condition is used because real systems tend to be baroclinic rather than barotropic and prefixes this condition with quasi. An incompressible fluid's flow under this condition forms a Taylor column and is independent of the two over here.
You risk it.
No, next forms a Taylor column and is independent of the coordinate parallel to the rotation axis according to the Taylor-Proudman theorem. This condition occurs when the ratio of the horizontal flow velocity to twice the angular velocity of Earth's rotation times the horizontal scale of the flow is much less than unity. Like hydrostatic equilibrium, it requires that there be no acceleration and that that ratio is the Rossby number. For 10 points, name this condition in which the pressure gradient force for a flow is balanced by the Coriolis effect.
Geostrophic.
That's right, for 10. Your bonus. Name some horses that are more erudite than Princess Celestia for 10 points each.
What the hell?
I don't know, I just read some. This horse, owned by Wilhelm von Osten, was taught to spell and tell time and other things, though at the bidding of Karl Stumpf, psychologist Oscar Funst concluded that it was just responding to the trainer's body language. Correct. This Arabian Hamiltonian colt, called the world's smartest horse, was the center of attraction in the 1904 St. Louis World's Fair. Its namesake trainer was an ex-slave who taught himself to be a veterinarian and claims to have taught this horse by kindness alone, proving once again that friendship really is magic.
Any idea? Moxon's master.
It's beautiful Jim Key. The Spanish knight El Cid rode on this horse, named for being stupid, because Cid's godfather Pedro el Grande thought it was a dumb choice for a champion. A dead El Cid was placed atop this horse during the siege of Valencia to scare the enemy.
What's the name of the horse? Didn't you read about the flag? Yeah. I don't know.
What do you got? It's Paglietta. So 10 points on the bonus. Toss-up number 2. What's going on? Good. Right, toss-up 2. This artist's version of the Annunciation features a brown-haired adolescent Mary draped in Middle Eastern cloth and a golden blotch of radiant light in place of Gabriel. A faceless man in white robes holding a lantern provides the lighting to this man's night scene, the flight into Egypt. The businessman Robert Wanamaker patronized this artist after he saw his Resurrection of Lazarus at the Salon of 1897. That act allowed him to make 1902's The Seine and 1919's The Arch. This artist was taught by Jean-Paul Lorenz after he left the United States, where he studied under Thomas Eakins. This man depicted a father and child.
Tanner.
That's right.
Yeah.
Your bonus. After he returned from Poland due to the Nazi invasion, this musician sought out Lester Young and engaged in a much-publicized jam session and jazz battle at the famous Door. For 10 points each, named this musician of the swing era, who in the late 1940s toured Europe and performed his solo piece, Picasso. No, it's Coleman Hawkins.
Oh.
Coleman Hawkins made an improvised two-chorus recording of this jazz standard in 1939. Its Johnny Green penned lyrics include "My Heart is Sad and Lonely," and it gives its name to a film noir about boxing.
It's like goodbye, or like
What do you got?
goodbye.
Body and Soul. Coleman Hawkins was primarily a player of this instrument. Other players include John Coltrane. 10 points. Toss up 3. Mark Richardson compares the speaker of this poem to Huck Finn in an analysis that frames it as a criticism of a certain mode of being white, noting that this poem comes fully alive only after one recognizes the import of a line about squiggling saxophones. This poem describes figures smacking their muzzy bellies in parade as disaffected flagellants, well stuffed, and lists tink and tank and tonka tonka tunk as novelties of the sublime. It tells its addressee that palm for palm, we are where we began, and admits we agree in principle, that's clear. It advocates building a haunted heaven and projecting a mask beyond the planets from, respectively, a nave and a peristyle constructed from the moral law and the opposing law. This poem notes that fictive things wink as they will, and opens with the related declaration, "Poetry's the supreme fiction, madam," for 10 points in this Wallace Stevens poem, whose title may refer to his religious mother. That's fine. No penalty.
Do this. I've never read.
It's a high-toned old Christian woman.
What?
Okay. Really hard. Toss up 4.
Yep.
This city was governed for a time by the rebel general Achaeus until he was betrayed by a resident named Bolus, leading to his capture by Antiochus III. According to legend, a concubine of Males came forward in the city with a young lion, and Males tried to fulfill El Telmessian prophecy by having that lion walk around this city. But this city became vulnerable because the lion couldn't walk up its steepest slope. Another story says that its destruction caused a ruler to shoot an arrow in the air and yell, "Jupiter, grant me revenge upon the Athenians," when he learned that Athens gave ship to Aristagoras to burn this city. The city on the banks of the Pactolus River and the slopes of Mount Tmolus was plundered after the Battle of Thymbra. An apocryphal tale says it was visited by King Solon of Athens, who engaged in a dialogue where he declined to praise the city's ruler for his wealth. For 10 points in this ancient capital of the Lydian Empire.
Oh, crap.
Time.
I'm sorry.
Neg 5, under King Croesus.
How can I assist?
It's Sardis.
Sardis.
Toss up 5. The study of this topic was partially reshaped by Louis Mink, who considered its various uses in narrative form as a cognitive instrument. A book about this subject has an epigraph from Gaston Bachelard's The Psychoanalysis of Fire, stating, "One can only study what one has dreamed about." That book analyzes this topic using the literary modes of Northrop Frye's Anatomy of Criticism. An essay on this topic proposes that various intellectuals approach this subject using either the antiquarian, monumental, or critical method.
History.
That's right.
Yeah.
This philosopher proposed that images have a space of horizontality that inspires the imagination in his book that examines the sense of the elemental, The Force of Imagination, for 10 points each. Name this American philosopher of phenomenology who examined Plato's Timaeus in chorology and the limits of his discipline in The Verge of Philosophy.
American phenomenologist.
We got
Yeah.
John Sallis. In The Verge of Philosophy, John Sallis examines the thoughts of this philosopher who argued that Western philosophy has privileged speech over writing in such books as Of Grammatology and Writing Indifference.
Derrida.
Correct. In Research in Phenomenology, John Sallis examines the relation of the elemental to this philosopher who argued that interiority was one of the layers of existence in his major work, Totalian Infinity.
Oh, that's
Levinas.
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 That is 20 points. Toss up 6. The protein vivid regulates this organism's response to blue light, which is mediated in part by the white collar complex. In one mechanism discovered in this organism, duplicated DNA sequences are removed during a sexual cross via the accumulation of numerous GC to AT mutations. That mechanism is repeat-induced point mutation. This organism's FRQ, or frequency gene, codes for a well-studied circadian clock protein. Its wild-type strains include Mauriceville and Oak Ridge. This organism has a haploid life cycle with 7 chromosomes, and it generates an ordered tetrad during meiosis. In a landmark experiment, that's 5 over here.
Like, tobacco mosaic
This
virus.
is not what I want. Mine's in a landmark experiment, X-ray-induced mutants of this organism were grown in various minimal and complete media, showing that all of the mutants that could not grow in minimal media were able to grow successfully with the addition of a single nutrient, such as biotin or thiamine for 10 points. Name this bread mold, a model organism used by George Beale and Edward Tatum to come up with the one gene, one enzyme hypothesis.
Neurospora crassa.
That is correct for 10 points. Bonus 4. This man appointed William Joyce, known as Lord Ha-Ha, as his propaganda director and made speeches with Nick Clark for 10 points each. Named this man who founded the British Union of Fascists and participated in the march that caused the Cable Street riots with the Metropolitan Police. Correct. Spurred on by Mosley and the White Defense League, these race riots broke out in London in 1958 when a Swedish sex worker was assaulted after fighting with her Jamaican husband. Sometimes called the Teddy Boy riots, they took place during the August bank holiday.
It's not Cable Street. It's not,
What do you got?
Tony Kennedy.
It's the Notting Hill riots. Though he was married to the daughter of Lord Curzon, Mosley carried on an affair and had 2 kids with a member of this British family of famous sisters. One of them was named Eugenie Valkyrie and was a devotee of Adolf Hitler, while perhaps the most famous one wrote the book Love in a Cold Climate. That's correct for 20. Toss of 7. In his first appearance, this character compares the title figure to a cicada of the long-legged race that always sings the same old ditty in the grass. In one scene, he entertains Frosch and Siebel by singing a song about a king with a giant flea while drinking an Auerbach cellar. This character gives advice to a protophantasmist by suggesting that he apply leeches to his fat rear end. Later, this character advises his companion that the magic image of Medusa's eyes are not that of his beloved. This character twice procures a case of jewels and leaves them behind in a certain character's cabinet so that his companion can seduce her. He first appears in the prologue in Heaven, where he and God have a conversation about the pursuits of the title figure. After another character attempts to translate the word logos, this character offers to show that man the great world and the small world when he transforms from his poodle into his human form.
That's a stoplight.
That is correct. 10 points.
God, that second clue was the thing.
Toss of 5. I mean, bonus 5. The main character of this novel accidentally forgets to take his civil service exam and leaves Kaifeng in search of glorious battles for 10 points each. In this historical novel by Yasushi Inoue, which follows Chao Tsing-te, a man who travels to the fringes of the Chinese Empire and becomes the man responsible for depositing the scrolls in the caves nearby the title town.
Yeah, I have no
Do we
idea.
have anything plausible but not racist?
Road to Haji.
No, it's Chunhuang. Yasushi Inoue's other novel, The Bullfight, won this semi-annual literary award, which is named for the author of Rashomon and Hellscream.
Yeah, Kutagawa.
This man won the Akutagawa Prize for his first major work, a novel in which an insurance agent forgets his name and is put on trial, called The Crime of Eskaruma.
Okay, say it.
Indeed, that is 20
That's
points.
the title.
That is.
It is. Toss up 8. The first movement of a work written for this ensemble introduces an unusually long theme in 3/2 time that spans more than 3 octaves, the first of 12 themes in the work. Lawrence Foster orchestrated that work for this ensemble, which features movements marked Tres Fugio and Movement de Valse bien rythmé, and is a C major work by George Enescu. Both a Niels Gade work in F major and a Max Bruch work in B flat major were written for this ensemble. Another work for this ensemble features a scherzo that was later orchestrated to replace the minuet.
Octet.
That's right. That was that's all you need.
It is now. Okay.
Do you remember when I came out?
I noticed it around toss-up 7. So I was thinking before that. That'll be 50, so.
Quiet in the auditorium, please. Shut up!
We'll get the rest of this stuff.
My permanent music picture.
Is that audio? Let's do it.
Oh, yeah. We'll have the audio. All right, here we go. Toss-up 11. If the trajectory of a photon traveling in a material possesses this property, the photon can constructively self-interfere via coherent backscattering. For Stokes' flow, a swimmer whose swim in motion possesses this property will not achieve propulsion according to the Scallop theorem. The surface states of topological insulators are protected by conservation of particle number and this property. All spin 1/2 eigenstates of a Hamiltonian with it must be at least doubly degenerate according to Cramer's theorem.
Like time reversible?
Yeah.
Okay.
Your bonus. Identify some actions, either literal or metaphorical, from Tennessee Williams' plays for 10 points each. The final speech in The Glass Menagerie ends with Tom Wingfield noting that nowadays the world is lit by lightning and begging Laura to do this thing, which according to the stage directions she then does. Yes, in The Night of the Iguana, the Reverend Shannon continually threatens to do this thing, a euphemism for committing suicide, while talking to Hannah Jelks. At one point, he darts off the veranda in an attempt to literally do this, but Maxine and a group of Mexican boys restrain him.
Jump off? Yeah. We just say that? Jump off?
No, it's Swimming to China. Alan Simpson was arrested on lewdness charges for directing an Irish production of The Rose Tattoo, in which this event from Act 3, Scene 1 was mined with a square of paper. This occurrence pisses off Serafina, briefly derailing her budding relationship with Alvaro.
The condom falls out of his pocket.
Okay.
That.
That's right. Toss of 12. After the success of this novel, its author wrote a number of works under the unusual pseudonym Brent of Bin Bin. A character in this novel hits a man in the face with a riding whip despite having agreed to marry him. That's incorrect.
That already came up.
Then only accepts a ring from him with the condition of a 3-month probationary period. The protagonist of this novel is distressed by the dirtiness of Barney's Gap, where she serves as a governess to the Muswat family. Its main character rejects proposals from Everard Gray, Frank Houghton, and her one true love, Harold Beecham. Followed 45 years later by a sequel in which the title thing goes bum, this novel was published with the aid of the poet Henry Lawson, and its success has allowed the author to fund a prize that was first won by Patrick White. 10 points named this novel title for Sibylla Melvin's dreams of being a writer, the most famous novel by the Australian woman Miles Franklin.
Oh, God. My life as a writer?
No, My Brilliant Career.
My brilliant career.
Toss of 13.
That's good.
At one point, this book cites a left-wing journalist who asks himself, must the just cause of a people include its deceptions and errors, after he realizes that his fate involves supporting the Quran and the Arab League. The author presents Nero as a typical model of the usurper who came to hate Britannicus more as he was hurting him, and not content having taken his throne, ravished his love for Junia. This nonfiction work takes themes from its author's earlier autobiographical novel narrated by Alexander Mordecai Ben Lelouch, which was entitled The Pillar of Salt. This book's republishing in 1991 added a new introduction by Nadine Gordimer, alongside its original intro by Jean-Paul Sartre. In its preface, the author writes that the second half of this book reflects his own perspective as a poor... That's not right. Reflects his own perspective as a poor Jewish boy growing up in Tunisia. For 10 points, name this non-fiction work by Albert Memmi, which uses the two title viewpoints to analyze colonialism.
Colonizer and the colonized?
Yes. Your bonus. Two spatial examples of these sets, P-space and NP-space, are equivalent. According to the Savage's theorem for templates each, name these kinds of sets which contain members whose inherent difficulties of the same order as other members in the same set. Examples include P and NP. That's right. This model of computation, consisting of a reliable verifier and an unreliable prover, is used to describe some computational complexity classes. Adding a cheating verifier to this model yields the zero-knowledge protocol.
Yes, I think that's right.
Interactive proof. That's right. Yeah. The complement of this problem is a member of the IP computational complexity class. This problem, which asks if two sets of vertices and edges are structurally equivalent, is one of the few problems that we know to be in NP, but we aren't sure whether it's in P, NP hard, or neither.
Is this for text cover?
No.
Click.
No.
Come on, Wikipedia.
What do you got for me?
K-click.
No, it's graph isomorphism.
Those are all NP complete, that's why.
Yeah.
Toss of 14. As Minister of Education, this man sent a noted letter instructing all teachers that there must be no sectarian or party spirit in your school. The teacher must rise above the fleeting quarrels which agitate society. That letter was sent after he authored the Great Schools Law. Pejoratively referred to as the Man of Ghent by his opponents, this author of the History of the Origins of Representative Government in Europe ascended to his highest office on the retirement of Nicolas Soult. As foreign minister, he created controversy when he rejected Leopold of Saxe-Coburg-Gotha as a suitor, and successfully demanded that the Moderado candidate Francis, the Duke of Cadiz, be wed to Isabella II. That incident called...
Palmerston?
No. Next 5. That incident called the Affair of the Spanish Marriages was this man's quarrel with Lord Palmerston. He succeeded his friend Boyer Collard as leader of the Doctrinaires, a party that promoted the notion of the jus milieu. For 10 points, name this man who dominated the Chamber of Deputies during the July Monarchy and was the rival of Adolphe Thiers while serving as Prime Minister under Louis Philippe until he was removed in 1848.
Valevsky.
Francois Guizot. Toss of 15. This artwork is discussed in a book by Harriet Sanine, which discusses Claes Oldenburg's viewpoint that the one true problem with it was that it was too honest. To explain its purpose, its artist wrote in a letter that this artwork contracts, expands, and ultimately changes in response to the viewer's movement. In response to questions posed by William Diamond, the artist's wife Claire Weiergraf compared the judgment of this artwork to Nazi book burning. This piece of process art was made out of a self-oxidizing material, which made it all more richly textured as time passed. It was commissioned by the GSA, who eventually oversaw a panel that ruled in favor of its...
Christ, it's just burden space.
Oversaw a panel that ruled in favor of its 1989 dismantlement. This 120-foot-long artwork stood in the Federal Plaza, Foley Square, New York. For 10 points, named the site-specific art installation by Richard Serra, whose name indicates that it is a piece of slightly bent metal.
So it's dark.
10 points. Your bonus. This character foolishly leads his armies against the demons of Mazandaran, but he is defeated and enchained by their leader, the White Demon, no thanks to his eagle-powered flying throne. For 10 points each. Named the son of Kay Kobad, whose sight is restored when a certain hero passes 6 trials, including defeating Arjang and killing the White Demon himself.
Okay, like,
What do you got?
Kangaskar.
No, it's Kay Caboose. Kay Caboose is rescued by this hero of the Shahnameh, who's likely the most famous for the tragic story in which he accidentally kills his son Sorad.
Rustam.
Yup. Rustam's birth was going poorly until this man, his father, summoned the Simurg, who taught him to perform the C-section. This albino married Rudabet, a descendant of Zahak.
Zalzkan.
That's right, 20 points.
Score.
So after 15, the score is 190 to 55. All right, toss of 16. At this location, religious services were held on Wednesdays and Sundays in which attendees were split into 3 orders. All children and newlyweds were in the lowest order, and a 13-member great council governed affairs. The last divine leader in charge of this place, the wife of George Landman, ordered that its members not plant any non-fruit-bearing trees, which was supervised by the kitchen bosses here. This entity purchased the town of Homestead so that it would have access to a railway depot as directed by that leader, Barbara Heinemann. In 1931, it underwent the so-called Great Change when its elders voted to allow secularization after its wool and flour mills went up in flames. It was founded by Christian Metz, a leader of the Community of True Inspiration, when he left the Ebenezer colonies in New York in 1854 to find a more pastoral location for his band of German pietists. 10 points in this utopian community set up in the Iowa River Valley, which later operated a business known for selling refrigerators. Okay, go ahead.
10 more.
Sadly, not the correct answer. The correct answer is Amana. It's the Amana colony.
They also sell refrigerators.
Toss of 17. This 2-word concept titles a book which closes with the chapter, "You're fucking around with us? Not for long." That work predicts that poetic vandalism will bring about its revolution and was written by Raoul Vaneigem. Another book named for this 2-word concept argues that a man standing on top of the Twin Towers is unable to understand this concept until he becomes a flaneur and treats the city below as a text that he's both reading and writing. A tome named for this 2-word concept discusses a sociology of the dustbin and criticizes capitalism for creating the vicious circle of works boredom necessitating leisure, which is itself necessary since identities can't be established through work. In that 3-volume work, this concept is comprised of a triad of subway, work, sleep for suburban commuters that gives rise to a false consciousness. For 10 points, Michael de Certeau discussed the practice of
Everyday life.
Your bonus. This artist illustrated Charles Dickens' sketches by Boz and Daniel Defoe's Robinson Crusoe. A version of his A Swarm of English Bees hiding in the Imperial Carriage appears on the cover of some editions of Vanity Fair for 10 points each, named as British caricaturist who satirized the politicians of the day in the magazine The Comic Almanac. That's what it is. George Cruikshank's The Bottle, which advocated for temperance, were inspired by this earlier satirist and artist, The Rake's Progress. Arthur Rackham, another Victorian illustrator, gained prominence for illustrating books about these kinds of creatures. These creatures, which give their name to a genre of painting and illustration, titled a Richard Dad painting, showing them succumbing to a masterstroke. So you got
Giant enemy crabs.
fairies, 20 points. Toss of 18. One parameter characterizing this phenomenon is the fragility index, which is the slope of an angel plot. One theory describing this phenomenon states that it takes place when the configurational entropy is 0, while another theory states that it occurs at a precise value of the free volume. The Gibbs-DiMarzio theory describes this phenomenon. Extrapolating the entropy curve for this phenomenon paradoxically yields a 0 change in entropy below a critical temperature, a result derived by Hausmann. The temperature dependence of viscosity in this phenomenon can be measured by the Vogel-Fulker-Taman equation, the Doolittle equation, or the Williams-Landau-Ferry equation. In general, the temperature at which this process occurs, 2 over here.
Let's try the glass transition.
10 points.
Yeah.
Identify the following authors of travel literature for 10 points each. This author described commissioning one of the first ever sleeping bags in his pro-hiking book, Travels with a Donkey in the Cevennes. He wrote The Adventures of David Balfour in the novels Catriona and Kidnapped.
Stevenson.
This author assisted the Cretan resistance during World War II, several years after taking a walking trip from the Hook of Holland to Constantinople that he chronicled in A Time of Gifts and Between the Woods and the Water.
No idea.
Parkland.
Patrick Lee Firmer. This man described sprinkling carpet tacks on the deck of his sloop Spray to protect himself from Tierra del Fuegians, and imagined the pilot of the Pinta assisting him at night in his magnum opus, sailing alone around the world.
No,
That's
okay.
someone else.
God, no.
And you got
Richard Henry Dennis.
Joshua Slocum, 10 points.
Okay, sure.
2019. Early in this novel, the protagonist spends a train ride counting 35 advertisements for the ox in the teacup. Another character in this novel bursts out laughing after reading the phrase, "The Story of Dante and Beatrice," told by Hans Andersen in a review of her husband's book, The Invisible Lover. Joan Thursley's fiancé kills himself after she falls in love with the protagonist of this novel, which also includes a scene in which the betrayal of Holtzman results in the kidnapping of Ecke Giesebrecht. The protagonist of this novel adopts the pacifistic philosophy of James Miller, whom he meets in Mexico while searching for a doctor for his injured friend Mark Staves. Its protagonist has affairs with both Mary Amberley and her daughter, Helen Ledwidge, and is soaked in blood alongside...
So that's Alice and Gaza.
Correct. That's a very
Your bonus. Answer the following about the invasion of Byzantine Greece by Murad II for 10 points each. Circa 1446, Murad II invaded the Peloponnesus by destroying this wall, which had been built during the 5th century AD under Theodosius II and stretched across the whole Isthmus of Corinth. It's thought to be the largest archaeological structure ever erected in Greece. It's the Hexamilion Wall. At that time, the entire Peloponnese was under the control of this despotate, which had been established in 1349 by the Byzantine Emperor John VI Cantacazenus and taken over by the Paleologus dynasty. It was ruled from a site near ancient Sparta.
So, like, was it just like the kingdom of Moria?
Yeah. The Mauryan despotate would be completely disbanded by this successor Murad II, whose most famous deed was his siege of Constantinople in 1453, conquering the Byzantine Empire.
Mehmet the Conqueror.
That is 20 points, and the last toss-up. A play about this event, written by Tom Hawken, featured a band composed of 3 people who took part in it: Bobby Jackson, Ray Wainwright, and Jean Shields, who was the daughter of a key leader in this event. The most comprehensive primary source on this event is a book by Ronald Liversedge, whose recollection describes how it was supported by Peter Mickelson, Jimmy Gardner, and Mayor Cornelius Ring. Early on, participants in this event had a meeting at Riverside Park in Camp.
This is the entrepreneur track.
In one effect, named for this scientist, longitudinal electron oscillations in a non-magnetized plasma lose energy due to interaction with resonant plasma particles traveling at near the wave space velocity. If you can't wait to each, name the scientist who also names the quantized cyclotron orbits of charged particles and magnetic fields. He developed a theory which explains the superfluidity of liquid helium. That's right. This plasma instability can be considered the inverse of Landau damping. It occurs when a beam of streaming electrons is fired into a plasma at a velocity close to the phase velocity of the plasma's electron wave, causing energy transfer from the beam to the wave. It's called the two-stream instability. Plasmas without charged particle beams in them typically obey this condition, which states that while locally the density of positive and negative charges varies, the total amount of positive charge equals the total amount of negative charge.
Okay. Local density approximation.
Quasi-neutrality, you get 10 points. There you go.
Up here. Don't get it yet, but just let
Wait, guys, there's an award ceremony happening after this.
Yeah, we're about to start the award ceremony, so everybody chill.
Just wait here for like 60 seconds, please.
Never again. Never again. No more.
Then individuals, then teams.
Sounds good.
The individual should be overall, then UG, then D2, and then team should be. I doubt it.
Okay. Well, whoever does it.
Okay, just go.
Are we ready to start? Are we ready to start with the
Yes. Okay. All right, everybody, listen up.
All right, there's no real podium for me to stand at. I'm just going to stand up here. We're going to announce the Carper Award, but before I do, I have a special first time ever award. As you all know, the resignation of Matt Weiner left a lot of things in the lurch. A lot of people have stepped up. There have been a lot of heroes of Quiz Bowl lately, but there's been no heroes more prolific than Matt Jackson.
Alright, thanks for coming out this year, guys. I hope everybody had fun. I know it was a nice time for me to edit it, and I want to thank my editing team. And as head editor of ACF Nationals, I'm presenting the Coco Award this year. This year's winner is Gary Vinoco.
Thanks, everybody. It's a real honor to be here, in front of the largest ACF Nationals we've ever had. Thank you all for coming out. And yes, they got this plaque, but really it's like the whole organization that makes it go. I'm just one cog in that machine. But it's a real honor to be recognized. And we hope you enjoyed yourselves. We hope you come back next year. We're going to try to do our best to give you a great tournament again and again and again. So thank you all.
Okay, next we're going to do individual awards. As many of you have heard, Oroni is the top individual scorer with 99.09 points per game throughout the prelims. The number 2 overall scorer was Dylan Menard from Northwestern. As a sophomore, he is also D2. So well done, Dylan.
And undergrad.
And undergrad,
Those are non-repeating. We're doing 4 undergrad for
Yes.
non-repeating.
Number 3 would be Matt Bollinger, but he's not here. So number 3 is Will Nettiger from Michigan A. Number 4 is Neil Gurham from MIT. Number 5, Eric Mukherjee. Number 6, Andrew Wang from Illinois. Number 7, Jordan Brownstein from Maryland. And lastly, number 8, Jacob Reed from Yale.
Yes, touch each other.
Not like that.
Keep going.
Another round of applause for Kentucky. Next, we move to undergrad. These are the next 4 undergrad scores.
Okay, I'm playing mine.
Number 1 overall, who's only undergrad, would be Richard Yu. Okay. Number 2, Derek So from McGill.
Derek's not undergrad.
He's a nuts.
That should have been fixed. Maybe it's not in the prelim file. It's fixed in the playoff files. Jason was
Well, he's not here, so
He's good at quiz ball.
the other number 2 would have been Tommy, but he's not here, so number 2, Sajid. Number 3, Hidehiro Anto from UCLA. from Berkeley.
Doesn't look like he's here.
Never mind. Just kidding. Number 4, Will Hulla-Morgan from Harvard.
Post your photo first.
Okay. And lastly, the top 4 D2 only scores. Number 1, Asim from Berkeley. Number 2, Julian from MITB. Number 3, Vimal from Harvard. And number 4, Sid from Michigan A. All right, now the overall awards, starting with D2. D2 second place team, MITB.
Thank you, congratulations.
First place overall in D2 would be Northwestern. All right. Next we're going to do undergrad. Third place undergrad, Yale.
So you guys, it's not that hard.
For the overall undergrad final, Stanford B held an advantage over Illinois. Illinois won the first game but lost the second, so second overall UG will be Illinois.
They found this ACF Nationals.
They do. Know where it came from.
Because the, like,
Yeah.
13 doesn't tell us.
It's right in the middle.
Well, like, you got a shirt. Well,
And thus our overall undergrad champion will be Stanford B.
Alright. Guys, do it. Do it. Okay. No, do better things.
Look over there first.
Yeah, look over here first. Alright, you good.
third place overall, finishing with a record of 9-2 in the playoffs, is Maryland. Top two teams coming out of the playoffs were Penn A and Chicago A, tied at 10-1. As you see, Penn just defeated Chicago A in a one-game final, so Chicago A is our second place champion. And your 2015 ACF Nationals champions, Penn A. Okay, other announcements for people. We still have this buzzer. We have no idea whose it is. Excellent. Maryland, you're awesome. All right. Related to Montgomery. Luggage up here still.
Illinois Buzzers also still up here?
Any concluding announcements, Jerry?
No, that's it. Thank you all very much for coming. We hope to see you next year. Thank you, Jerry.